There is a certain silence that follows betrayal, a silence so heavy it echoes louder than any scream. And in that silence, the truth begins to rise. You see, people think they can outrun the consequences of their actions, that if they lie convincingly enough, if they betray quietly enough, the world will forget, or worse, that justice won't come knocking. But reality doesn't work like that. There's an order to things, a structure deeper than law and louder than words. And that structure remembers. You might bury the truth, but it roots itself underground. You might walk away from the damage you caused, but the circle is already forming behind you, because every lie cast into the world carries weight, and every betrayal sets a cycle in motion. It may not happen tomorrow, it may not even happen in this lifetime, but it always comes back, full circle. This is not about revenge. This is about reality. And reality always settles its accounts. The moral law is inescapable. There is a structure beneath everything we experience, a hidden order that governs more than just physics or biology. It governs human behavior. This structure may not wear a uniform or carry a gavel, but it delivers judgment in ways more profound than any courtroom. It's not just about cause and effect. It's about meaning, intention, consequence. Every choice we make, every word we speak, and every promise we break writes itself into the fabric of that moral structure. And while people may believe they can outmaneuver it, ignore it, or pretend it doesn't exist, it never disappears. It simply waits. When someone lies, especially when it's deliberate and calculated, they're not merely deceiving others, they are fracturing their connection to this deeper order. Betrayal isn't just a personal failure. It's a violation of something sacred. Trust is the glue that holds human relationships together, and when it's broken for selfish gain, the damage ripples outward. At first, it may look like the person who lied or betrayed walks away untouched, even rewarded. They may gain influence, attention, affection, all built on illusion. But illusions demand maintenance, and the longer they are upheld, the more reality demands payment. Eventually, what was hidden becomes exposed, not because someone finds it, but because truth has a gravitational pull. They may be buried for a time, but it resists staying underground. This is the nature of the moral law. It does not chase, but it never forgets. The person who builds a life on deception unknowingly creates the architecture of their own downfall. And the strange irony is they usually don't see it coming, because the very act of lying dulls the part of the mind that perceives danger. Their self-deception becomes so complete, they mistake their rising success for safety. But the law is still in motion. It doesn't stop because you're comfortable. It keeps turning. The real weight of betrayal doesn't fall all at once. It descends in pieces. Missed opportunities, broken relationships, inner unrest that can't be medicated or explained away. That's how life balances the scales, slowly, quietly, sometimes painfully, but always inevitably. And when that moment arrives, when the full circle completes itself, it doesn't come with revenge, it comes with clarity, the kind that shatters illusions and confronts the betrayer with the one thing they thought they escaped, themselves. So no matter how far someone runs, no matter how cleverly they craft the lie, the moral structure of life records it, not out of cruelty, but out of necessity. Because if truth didn't return, if betrayal went unaccounted for forever, there would be no meaning in right or wrong. But there is meaning. And that's why, no matter how long it takes, the consequences always arrive. What you do to others, you ultimately do to yourself. We often think of our actions as external, as things we do to others, for others, or against others. But what few people realize is that every single action we take, especially those involving deception or betrayal, leaves a mark on us first. When someone lies, they're not just manipulating reality in front of another person, they're reshaping their inner world. They're distorting the relationship they have with truth, and over time, that distortion corrupts their sense of identity. To betray someone is to violate trust, and trust is not just about what exists between people, it's also about what exists within a person. You can't betray someone else without in some way betraying a part of yourself. You must shut down your empathy, dull your conscience, and quiet the internal voice that says, "This isn't right." You don't just commit the act, you must condition yourself to live with it. And that process always exacts a cost. Over time, the emotional toll begins to surface in subtle but undeniable ways. You'll see it in anxiety that has no clear source, in relationships that never quite feel real, in a persistent sense of disconnection from purpose or peace. That's not coincidence. That's the residue of unresolved wrongs. That's what happens when you hurt others and try to escape the internal mirror that reflects the truth of those actions back to you. What we do to others reflects who we are becoming. And if you deceive long enough, you don't just hurt those around you, you begin to lose the ability to even recognize your own authenticity. A person who constantly lies, who constantly betrays others to get ahead, begins to mistrust everyone because deep down they know what they themselves are capable of. That paranoia, that suspicion, it's not a sign of wisdom, it's a projection of guilt. They can't see good in others because they've silenced it in themselves. Some people confuse short-term gains with long-term wisdom. They might believe they've succeeded by manipulating others, especially if their betrayal seems to yield rewards. But what they don't realize is that they're building a life on quicksand. Because no amount of external success can compensate for a fractured internal foundation. Eventually, the weight of what they've done begins to pull them down. And there's no ladder that can be bought or borrowed to escape that descent. The deeper truth is this. Everything you send out into the world, whether it's kindness or cruelty, truth or lies, eventually makes its way back to you. Not just through others, but within yourself. Your soul keeps score in ways your mind may try to forget. And what you inflict upon others, especially when it's done consciously, always becomes part of your own reflection. That is the inescapable reality of betrayal. So no matter how well crafted the deception, no matter how convincing the mask, you can't fool your own spirit. What you do to others lives in you, and until it's faced, it festers. Because in the end, the worst punishment for betraying others isn't what they feel, it's what you become. The circle of consequences is delayed, not erased. One of the most dangerous illusions in life is the belief that because consequences don't appear immediately, they won't appear at all. This is how deception often grows, through false confidence in silence. A lie is told, trust is broken, betrayal is committed, and nothing happens. The world stays quiet, no alarms sound, no punishments arrive, and in that stillness the deceiver begins to feel invincible. But life doesn't respond on our schedule. It moves with a rhythm all its own, and when it comes to justice, real justice, the kind rooted in truth and time, it does not rush. It observes, it waits, it allows people to build, sometimes even to rise after they've done harm, not because they are exempt from consequence, but because the fall must match the height of their arrogance. The delay is not forgiveness, it is preparation. There's a strange law at work in the universe. The greater the betrayal, the more intricate the return. People who cause harm often believe that time is their ally, that if enough weeks, months, or even years pass, What they did will be forgotten, or at the very least buried. But they misunderstand the nature of time. Time doesn't erase truth, it reveals it, slowly, relentlessly. Often when the betrayer has everything to lose, many who commit betrayal become emboldened by the absence of immediate fallout. They start to believe they've outsmarted life, that they've bent reality to their will. They may even convince themselves they deserved the success they achieved through manipulation. But that belief is a trap, one that binds them tighter the longer they walk in self-deception. Because the consequences they avoid don't disappear. They accumulate, and when they return, they arrive with interest. Sometimes it's not the loss of reputation or relationships that breaks them. It's the internal collapse. The moment they realize they're surrounded by things that were built on a lie. Or the moment the mask slips and they're forced to confront the wreckage they've left behind. By then, it's not just about fixing what was done. It's about facing who they've become. The delay of consequence can be mistaken for mercy, but in reality, it's precision. Life allows a person to show the fullness of their character, to build their tower high so that when it falls, and it always falls, it teaches more than just a lesson. It exposes the truth, not just to others, but to the one who caused the harm. So, no matter how far removed someone feels from their betrayal, the circle is still turning. It may be slow, it may be quiet, but it's moving. And when it completes, it will not ask for permission to settle the account. It will simply arrive in the form of lost trust, broken peace, or a mirror that finally reflects what they've refused to see. Because consequence isn't a threat, it's a law. And its delay is not its absence, it's the silence before the storm. Truth has a memory, so does pain. Truth is not passive. It does not fade simply because people ignore it. And pain, though often buried under distraction or denial, has a memory far longer than we like to admit. When someone betrays you, when they look you in the eyes and lie, they're not just breaking trust in that moment. They're leaving behind an imprint. And that imprint, no matter how much time passes, becomes a quiet force working in the background of your life. For the one who lies, who manipulates, who harms and walks away, it may feel like closure, a chapter closed, a clean escape, but it isn't. What they forget is that the truth doesn't need an audience to exist. It doesn't vanish because it goes unspoken. It waits patiently, and in time it begins to resurface, sometimes through unexpected revelations, sometimes through whispers that turn into waves. The truth always finds a way because its very nature is to rise. But it's not only truth that remembers. Pain does too, especially the kind caused by betrayal. It may not scream every day, but it lingers. It shapes the way you see the world, the way you trust, the way you protect yourself. People think that if the one who was hurt appears strong, composed, or even healed, the damage must have been minimal. What they don't understand is that many carry their deepest wounds in silence, not because they've forgotten, but because they've chosen to live beyond the pain, not beneath it. Yet for the one who caused the pain, there is no such peace. They might suppress the memory of what they've done, pretend it never happened, or even rewrite the story to make themselves the victim. But the mind is not that easily fooled. Deep down, somewhere beyond the noise of daily life, their conscience records every act, every manipulated moment, every betrayal they justified. It stores them not in punishment, but in preparation, because sooner or later something cracks. A dream turns into a recurring fear. A relationship mirrors back the damage they once caused, or solitude finally becomes loud enough to bring their past to the surface. You cannot lie your way into peace. You cannot betray others and expect to build a life untouched by the weight of those actions. The pain they caused may have been pushed aside, but it doesn't disappear. It becomes part of them. It shapes their fears. It haunts their silences. And often, when the world gets quiet, that pain speaks the loudest. In contrast, the one who was hurt, the one who was left to pick up the pieces, carries a different kind of memory, a memory not of vengeance, but of awakening. They remember what was done, but they also remember who they became because of it. The betrayal hurt, but it also revealed truth about others, about themselves, about the strength they didn't know they had. That is the sacred memory pain leaves behind when you choose to heal instead of harden. So yes, truth remembers, pain remembers. And if someone thinks they've escaped both simply because time has passed, they misunderstand how deeply life keeps records. Nothing done in darkness stays hidden forever. Not because the world is cruel, but because healing, restoration, and justice all begin with truth. And truth never forgets. Healing begins where justice is left to time. There's a point you reach after the betrayal, after the collapse, after the long sleepless nights of questioning what you did to deserve it, where you realize that justice doesn't always come wrapped in the timing you want. The hurt demands answers. The betrayal cries out for accountability. And your soul, raw and exposed, wants nothing more than to see the person who caused you pain face what they've done. That's natural, that's human. But this is the truth no one tells you when your heart is shattered. The moment you stop trying to force justice and start trusting that time has its own way of settling accounts is the moment healing begins. Not because the pain stops immediately, not because everything suddenly makes sense, but because you start to shift the focus away from them and back to you. And that shift changes everything. When you've been betrayed, it's easy to believe your power was taken from you. Someone lied to your face. They misused your loyalty. They walked away as if your suffering meant nothing. And in the aftermath, you feel powerless, like a casualty in a war you didn't start. But that feeling, while real, is not the truth of who you are. Powerlessness is the illusion that betrayal leaves behind. But healing begins when you realize you still have a choice. You can choose not to carry their actions as your identity. You can choose to let go of the need for immediate justice, not because you condone what happened, but because you're not willing to chain your future to their wrongs. And most of all, you can choose to grow, to rebuild, to become someone stronger, more rooted, more aware, not in spite of the betrayal, but because of what it revealed. The real justice in life isn't just seeing someone fall who once hurt you. That's surface-level satisfaction, temporary, fleeting. The deeper justice is becoming someone they no longer have access to, someone whose life no longer revolves around their memory, someone whose growth becomes the evidence that their betrayal did not win. That is the kind of justice that time delivers, not through revenge, but through transformation. And here's something even more powerful. Sometimes the ones who betrayed you do face the consequences, just not in the ways you expect. They may not lose everything publicly. They may not admit their wrongs. But life has a way of bringing people face to face with the emotional debts they created. The person who betrayed you might look like they're thriving from the outside. But when the crowds leave and the distractions fade, what's left? They sit alone with the person they've become. And if they haven't grown, if they've buried their wrongs rather than confronted them, then they carry that weight with them everywhere. People don't escape themselves. That's the justice no one sees. But let's bring the focus back to you. Because healing isn't really about them. Healing is about choosing to live with open eyes, with wisdom gained, and with a heart that refuses to close permanently. It's the quiet, daily decision to say, I will not let this harden me beyond recognition. That's not weakness. That's strength on a level most people never reach. And part of that strength is learning to let go of the obsession with fairness. Fairness in a broken world is a rare currency, but meaning is everywhere. There is meaning in your scars. There is meaning in the silence that taught you to listen to yourself. There is meaning in the isolation that showed you who you are when no one else was around. That is the beginning of true healing. When you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And start asking, what is life asking me to become because of this? And let's be honest, letting go isn't passive. It's not pretending you don't care. It's not ignoring the damage. It's the hardest kind of work because it requires you to face the truth without the crutch of revenge. It requires you to walk forward, carrying the full weight of the experience and still choosing to build something beautiful with the broken pieces. That's not weakness. That's mastery. There comes a moment in the healing journey, a quiet, almost sacred moment, where you realize you're no longer triggered by their name. You no longer rehearse conversations in your head. You no longer check to see if they've suffered. You just breathe. And in that breath, you find peace. Not because the world fixed itself, not because karma showed up with a perfect bow, but because you decided to live free. That's what happens when you leave justice to time. You stop living in reaction to your past and start living in response to your future. You let life handle what life always handles, and you return to the one thing you can control, your growth, your healing, your vision. And one day, maybe weeks, maybe years later, the story shifts. You'll meet someone new. You'll take a risk again. You'll wake up and realize the person you became wouldn't want to go back to who you were before the betrayal. Not because the pain was good, but because it carves space in you for something stronger, something wiser, something more deeply human. And if on some distant day, the person who hurt you comes to terms with what they've done, the question will no longer be, do they regret it? The question will be, have I grown so far beyond that moment that their regret no longer defines my worth? Because that's the ultimate freedom. When you no longer need justice to come for them, because life has already restored you. So don't chase justice. Let it come in its own time. Let life finish what it started. In the meantime, build, heal, love again, and remember, every betrayal sets something in motion, not just for them, but for you. And when you choose growth over revenge, when you choose to rebuild instead of collapse, you become the most powerful response to the pain they caused. That's the full circle they never saw coming.